Welcome to News at Night for Thursday, December the 10th. I'm Colette Linden.
I'm Craig Huckerby. I'll have your full weather details coming up right after the news.
As today pays homage to UN Human Rights Day, the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services announced funding over 5 years through the Indigenous-led Initiative Fund towards the anti-human trafficking protection and healing of Indigenous women and girls. Today's announcement represents one of the largest investments in Canada to an Indigenous women's agency. The Ontario Native Women's Association will use these funds to further develop and expand the Courage for Change program across Ontario. Expansion of this program will lend more attention to the unique needs of the disproportionate numbers of Indigenous women, youth, and girls affected by human trafficking. Indigenous women and girls who are currently at risk, involved in, or a survivor of human trafficking will be supported under this program. It is vital to offer and provide tools to assist youth and get them the services they require. The goal is to create a network of coordinated anti-human trafficking supports and services across the province. The first new program partner will be the Niagara chapter of Native Women in Fort Erie, a priority area due to the current lack of programming, high tourism, and proximity to the U.S. border. ONWA will assist with program setup, training, and ongoing support to ensure sustainability. On December the 9th at approximately 11:45 a.m., members of the Superior East Detachment of the OPP responded to the report of a person in violation of their court-ordered release conditions. At approximately 2:00 p.m., the individual was located and arrested. As a result of the investigation, Christopher Beeland, 24 years of age, from Wawa, was charged with failure to comply with undertaking. The accused was released from custody and is scheduled to appear before the Ontario Court of Justice on January the 11th in Wawa.
You're arrested right now for assaulting a police officer. You're also under arrest for trespassing.
The mayor of Timmins says some crimes are on the rise in his city because more criminals are being released from jail. Bail is being granted to more inmates and accused awaiting trial to avoid overcrowding in jails during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's also generally easier to be granted bail since the federal government passed Bill C-75 last year. Timmins Police has received 1,151 fewer calls this year, but has responded to 295 break-in and enters compared with 218 last year. Mischief calls are also up to 135 from 99 in 2019. City Council passed a motion this week calling on the provincial and federal governments to review the bail system and find a way to keep communities safe. Even during the pandemic, he says the province should find a way to keep more criminals behind bars. Sault Ste. Marie Police have also been very critical of the looser bail restrictions and the catch and release cycle they find themselves in with repeat offenders. Greater Sudbury Police say they have actually seen break-and-enters and mischief calls go down in 2020, but are responding to more calls about illegal drugs, weapons, arson, and landlord-tenant disputes. People in Ontario could face higher taxes or service cuts as municipalities face billions of dollars in COVID-19 related expenses, the province's fiscal watchdog warned today. Financial Accountability Officer Peter Weltman said the pandemic will cost Ontario municipalities $6.8 billion over the next 2 years. He also warned that while the joint federal-provincial restart agreement linked earlier this year provided a $4 billion relief, and municipalities will find some savings, a $2.4 billion shortfall exists for the coming year. Barring further intervention from upper levels of government, the costs will fall to local taxpayers. Municipal leaders have been calling for help from the provincial and federal governments to help with the funding shortage. Toronto Mayor John Tory called for a Safe Restart 2.0 agreement for municipalities in a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Premier Doug Ford said, "I think the timing for them is now to understand what they're going to have to do to mitigate whatever potential shortfalls are coming their way." Municipal Affairs Minister Stephen Clark said on Thursday that municipalities will receive clarity on a second phase of funding before the end of the year. The Ontario government was expected to release new COVID-19 projections later today. The province's Chief Medical Officer of Health said earlier this week that the data will indicate whether lockdowns in Toronto and Peel region that started 2 weeks ago are working. Projections released early last month suggested Ontario could see as many as 6,500 new daily cases by mid-December unless steps were taken to limit the spread of the virus. When Prime Minister Justin Trudeau meets with the premiers today, competing priorities could undermine a national approach to fighting the pandemic. The premiers demanded this meeting to discuss their call for a permanent annual boost of $28 billion to healthcare transfers. Ontario Premier Doug Ford will push the federal government to commit to a funding increase by the spring budget. While Trudeau has agreed to a conversation on transfers, federal sources say the Prime Minister wants to keep the focus on the immediate threat posed by the second wave of the coronavirus and that no no formal committed to a specific funding boost is likely to come out of this meeting. Dr. Ann Collins, president of the Canadian Medical Association, said the First Ministers must deal with the acute problems facing the health system as well as the chronic ones. She said the pandemic exposed cracks in what was already an ailing healthcare system, plagued by long waits for tests and surgical procedures and gaps in long-term care. Right now, the provinces spend $188 billion on healthcare, and the federal government covers $42 billion, or roughly 22% of total costs. The increase proposed by the premiers would see the federal government cover 35% of health costs. The premiers have said long-term funding is needed to meet rising health system costs caused by factors that predate the pandemic, such as an aging population and the increasing expense of new medical technologies and drugs. As competing priorities strain efforts to come to a consensus at the First Minister's table, so too will federal doubts about how some provinces have handled the second wave. The federal source said those questions center around how certain provinces have or have not used the resources Ottawa has sent them to deal with the pandemic.
Hi again, everyone. Well, we have a little bit of snow for tonight. I'll give you those details coming up. But we're also watching a big system for the weekend. Will it hit us and finally give us the snow that we're all looking for? I'll give you those details coming up. Welcome back, everyone. Well, we had a pretty dull day today, kind of a cool, misty day today, but temperatures, believe it or not, are still well above seasonal. And the reason why we're staying rather warm at this time of year, this year anyway, is because there's no cold air in the upper atmosphere. We need, for us to be cool at the surface, we need cold air at the upper atmosphere, and we don't see that just yet, but it is coming, and I'll show you that on the satellite shot. This is the system we have to worry about for tonight. We may pick up some showers, we may pick up some light flurries, but nothing is going to accumulate because temperatures are going to stay above freezing for the overnight. But this is coming from way down here, and this is a huge system that's brewing. We have another low pressure system here, and they're going to kind of merge over the eastern Great Lakes. So basically, we're not really going to see a lot of snow from this system on the weekend. Originally we were going to see 5 to 10, but now the jet stream is going to set up here. That means all that activity is going to be moving up the eastern seaboard, giving them the flurry activity. Let's take a look at our overnight lows for tonight. Really not low at all at 2 degrees. -2 in Wawa, -5 is the cool spot in Thunder Bay, and Timmins coming in at -1, Sudbury at the freezing mark. So not all that bad for overnight temperatures. Those are going to dip next week, and we'll show you that in the 7-day. But right now, let's look at the 3-day forecast. For tomorrow, we're going to see a mix of sun and cloud. Don't be surprised if you do wake up with a little bit of dusting on the lawn, but temperatures at 2 degrees is not going to stick around. Temperatures are going to dip to -6 for the overnight. That's when the colder air is coming in from that upper level disturbance. -2 for a daytime high on Saturday. We see some flurry activity developing in the afternoon. Right now it looks like 2 to 3 centimeters is likely, but really that could change in the next 24 hours. Temperatures dipping to -8. Waking up Sunday morning with a mix of sun and cloud. Again, we could see some flurry activity. We could see some rain showers, or actually freezing rain showers, as temperatures are at -3 and only falling to -4 for the overnight on Sunday. Now let's take a look at the 7-day. And you can see we're not above freezing for all week, starting with Saturday, -2. Mind you, we're close to the freezing mark, so it's not really all that cold yet. Overnight lows are dipping to -5. Those are actually, the overnight lows are actually what we should see during the daytime at this time of year. So really not a lot of weather to tell you about. We will monitor that system because things could change in the next 36 hours, so we'll keep an eye on that for you. Right now, that's your weather for now. I'll be back tomorrow morning for First Local, and Colette has more news coming up.
A 16-year-old highly touted prospect was one of 7 players cut from Team Canada's World Junior Selection Camp today. Hockey Canada announced the native of Burlington, Ontario scored 39 goals and added 27 assists in just 58 games for the Kingston Frontenacs last season, his first in the OHL. Other players released include goalies Brett Brochu from London and Tristan Lennox from Saginaw, as well as forwards Adam Beckman from the WHL, Tyson Forster from Barrie, Hendrix Lapierre from the QMJHL, and Cole Schwint from Mississauga. Lapierre, 18, was selected by the Washington Capitals in the first round, 22nd overall in this year's NHL draft. Forster, also 18, was selected 23rd overall by the Flyers. Lapierre, 18, was selected by the Washington Capitals in the first round, 22nd overall in this year's NHL draft. Forster, also 18, was selected 23rd overall by the Philadelphia Flyers. With the latest round of cuts, Canada's roster of goalies has now been set with Taylor Gauthier, Dylan Garon, and Devin Levi set to play at the World Juniors. Hockey Canada says 34 players remain at the selection camp in Red Deer, Alberta. They need to get that number down to 25 by the time they leave for the Edmonton bubble on Sunday. The final 9 cuts are likely to come after today's final inter-squad scrimmage.
And I have a feeling that this finals MVP is going to have a trophy named after him one day. The finals MVP is LeBron James.
LeBron James has been named Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year for 2020. James led the LA Lakers to their first NBA championship win in a decade and was also named the NBA Finals Most Valuable Player. He was named the Athlete of the Year by Time Magazine in recognition of what he achieved both on and off the court. The NBA championship win was the Lakers' 17th title win and equaled the previous record held by Boston. Off the court, he was one of the first and influential sportsmen to speak out against racial injustice and led his support to the Black Lives Matter movement. The NBA championship win was the 4th title James won, and it was also his 4th NBA Finals MVP award, making him the first player in NBA history to win the accolade with 3 different teams. Michael Jordan, who won 6 MVP awards, is the only player with more titles. James had already extended his contract with the LA Lakers and has signed a new 2-year deal. Tony Ferguson believes he is a big reason the UFC resumed operations as quickly as it did in 2020, and he theorizes that everyone profited from that quick return except for him. Ferguson, who's 25-4, will face Charles Oliveira, 29-8, at UFC 256 on Saturday, in his first appearance since he suffered a 5-round beating at the hands of Justin Gaethje on May the 9th. That UFC 249 event marked the end of an 8-week stretch during which the UFC canceled 5 events due to the pandemic, and it came while the NBA, NFL, MLB, and NCAA postponed operations. Ferguson was supposed to fight the Eagle Khabib Nurmagomedov for the undisputed lightweight championship at UFC 249, but the pandemic canceled the scheduled April date. Rather than wait for the UFC to rebook that lucrative title fight, Ferguson agreed to a new opponent and a new location. Then came another new location when the UFC's backup plan fell through. Then there was a new date when those plans changed again. In the middle of it all, Ferguson elected to cut weight for an event that was already postponed. He said it was because he had committed to it and wanted to give the world something to follow. It was the move many in the MMA world second-guessed and even ridiculed. He eventually suffered the loss and snapped a 12-fight win streak.